Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. The idea of increased flexibility at work is an attractive one for most people, and it means different things to different people. It could be flexibility in terms of your work schedule or work location, maybe flexibility in terms of tasks or something like job crafting. For some, it could simply mean a greater amount of autonomy at work. So the possibilities are really quite vast when you think about it, because they could be so individualized. Greater flexibility at work isn't limited solely to these obvious benefits. They can also include some less obvious benefits, such as decreased likelihood of burnout or increased job satisfaction. It's important to realize and embrace the reality that flexibility is not a given and it is not a freebie. Sometimes increased flexibility, if not executed properly, can compromise productivity. It can come with the cost of compromised or decreased productivity. So it's really important to remember that if you are striving for greater flexibility at the workplace, you must not allow your productivity to suffer. Greater flexibility also comes with greater responsibility. It's important to remember that. Every individual who wants greater flexibility at the workplace will likely have to embrace greater responsibility. The two go hand in hand. When we first think about increased flexibility at work, this whole idea may seem very much focused on the individual employee, but if this concept is executed correctly, it can and should benefit both sides, meaning both management and the individual employees, both the organization and its workforce. When we think about increased flexibility, especially one that is executed properly, the reality of that comes down to collaboration between management and employees. It comes down to the kind of relationship and the quality of the relationship between employee and manager. Both sides have to go into it with eyes wide open, because both sides have to put in some work and make some sacrifices in order for greater flexibility at work for the individual to truly work and to truly be beneficial for both sides. For example, management may have to give up some of its control. Management may also have to give up some of its decision making. That would be an example when increased autonomy is part of that equation. The individual has to be able to deliver in the sense of proving that you're capable of handling this extra flexibility at work without sacrificing productivity. So both sides have to work towards a good outcome when we're talking about increased flexibility at the workplace. This brings me to the idea of goals. Both sides, meaning management and individual employees, have to understand their own individual goals as they pertain to this idea of increased flexibility. But they also have to understand the collective goal or goals that both sides share, because it's only when all of those goals, individual goals and shared goals, receive equal amounts of effort and are embraced equally, that's when you're much more likely to have the best outcome that gives increased flexibility to the employee, but benefits both sides at the same time. While at first glance, the idea of increased flexibility at work may seem like winning the jackpot for the individual employee, it's critical to realize that when done correctly, it can and should benefit both sides. And in the same way that it can benefit both sides, it also requires that both sides are equally committed to this idea and put in the required effort into making it work and making the best out of the idea of increased flexibility at work. It can truly benefit everybody involved. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. The idea of greater flexibility at work is a very attractive one, but it's one that has to be examined or really seen with eyes wide open. It's something that requires more responsibility on the individual's end, and it requires commitment and effort from both the individual and the management. But the bottom line is that when executed correctly, greater flexibility for the individual at the workplace can lead to many benefits that go beyond just the general flexibility, however the individual may define that flexibility. It can also come in the form of decreased likelihood of burnout and an increased satisfaction or job satisfaction in general. Those benefit everybody involved. Those are good for both the employee and the employer. Both sides have to put in some effort, and both sides may have to make some sacrifices, but when executed correctly, increased flexibility at work goes far beyond just the jackpot for the individual. It's something that benefits everybody involved, and it's worth exploring for both the organization and its employees. As the week unfolds, I encourage everybody to examine and explore this concept of increased flexibility at work. Whether you're in management or whether you're part of the workforce, this applies to you equally in terms of what you can benefit from it as an individual and what the organization can gain from correctly executed increased flexibility at the workplace. As you remember from earlier in this episode, this is all about collaboration. It's all about a relationship and the quality of that relationship between the company and its employees. So whether you're in management or you're in a non-management position at your workplace, I highly encourage you to think about this idea of increased flexibility at work, because it's one that can benefit everyone when it is executed properly. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G. In addition to finding the video version of the podcast on my YouTube channel, you can also find videos that pertain to effective stress management. So I invite you to check that out. The link for my YouTube channel is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.